Hey there. Okay, so today let's get serious with Logic's flagship synth, which is called Alchemy, right here. Okay, I'm going to try and make something that's kind of, you know, funky, some kind of lead that has lots of movement in it, and otherwise just begin to look at this crazy, awesome synth. So the first thing we need to do is go to File and Initialize Preset, right here, okay? And then I've drawn myself in already a little bit of MIDI. Okay, so it's just a simple little thing, you know. Again, there it is at F2. Let's see what we can come up with. So we have reset it, we've initialized the patch, okay, and it looks really complicated, I guess. All these kind of different sections going on. You know, where do we even begin? Okay, so now we have done initialize preset. Let's look at this top section here. Okay, it's switched to global at the moment. But you can see here that there's 4 oscillator sections. Okay. Think back to the retro synth. There's 4 here. There are 2 in that. This one's got 4. Right. So when we hit play, oscillator A is on. B is off. C and D are off. And look at oscillator A, it happens to be playing this sawtooth shape. So that's fine. Here's the volume. If I Alt and click on that, it resets it to its default value. You can see that we've got coarse tuning and fine tuning. So we can go up and down in semitones. I just double clicked on it then. Yeah, or we can drift in between semitones. You know, those are called cents. Okay, over here we have some other parameters, the phase and the sync of this sawtooth. So we'll think about those a little bit. So first things first, this far more advanced synth gives us far more preset oscillators to choose from. All these crazy things here. Okay. Complex ones, pulse waves, so on and so on. So let's explore some. So, big and dirty sounds pretty big and dirty, I guess. Maybe we'll go with 80s notch. So what does that sound like? If you move the sync around, you can hear that has got a really interesting kind of feel to it as it moves. So just like in the retro synth, we might say, well, okay, what can we do? Let's try and get this thing moving somehow by itself. Okay, let's try and modulate it. Right, so I'm going to right click on it, okay, and I'm going to choose Add Modulation, LFO, a new one. Okay, so I'll click here, and you can see that it's added an LFO, a low frequency oscillator, a sine wave. So you might remember that as soon as I now just increase that depth, that's how much this LFO, as you can see, is making that sync value move. Okay, so a lot or not too much. So here's a lot. Maybe there's a little bit. And then How fast is it moving? Well, that's designated by this rate value over here. I'm going to put that on 1. And the next thing we need to consider now is, like, if you notice, every time the note is struck, it starts its journey again from the central point towards a positive value here, a positive up. Okay, so that is dictated by this trigger being switched to on. If I turn that off, you can see that it's now kind of free floating, just simply oscillating backwards and forwards at this very slow value. So you can hear that instantly. That's kind of interesting. It means that every time the note is struck, you get a slightly different tone. So great, how very interesting. Okay. So, looking back over, I'm still on A. We've got the LFO tab showing at the moment. Let's go to AD AHDSR. And of course, I hope you can remember that this is the attack decay sustained and release value. We have this new value called hold. Okay, but either way, this is the envelope that is dictating what the loudness of the sound does. So you can see that a slower attack means the note is no longer kind of sudden every time the note is struck here. It's more gradual. We might want it to be quite sudden. We could turn down the sustain a bit. Okay, so I'm just tweaking so you can kind of visually get a clue as to what this envelope is doing and what this hold value is doing. So you see how that works? So, you know, maybe we like that particular set of commands for how the loudness is going to behave through time. Okay, and we've got a tiny bit of movement on the sync value for that first oscillator A. So if I turn A off, we don't hear anything at all now, of course. I'm going to flip to B, and it's as if we're now starting again with this second oscillator B. Okay, so I'm going to turn B on and choose something else. Something else, maybe harmonic edge. So you can hear what harmonic edge sounds like. It's a bit kind of thin and, you know, nasally somehow. Does it sound good when we move these things? Okay, well maybe that value there is interesting as we move it. So why don't we right click and add it to the same LFO as before, or really I should say get this LFO to now move this one about. So you remember we crank the depth. Okay, if we go the opposite way, it's going to force it to go into the negative first. Okay, so I'm going to turn A on again. And if I go to global, we can see that both turn that filter section up. I'm just going to turn this filter section off. We can see that both A and B are now on. And so I wonder, let's mess with the coarse tuning on B. So that's kind of quirky, get that? I've put B 4 semitones higher than A. And as you can hear, we've got quite a nice harmony, a chord going with a single note. We could go, okay, do you know what? I don't like that one anymore. Okay, let's just choose, you know, plastic voice. So the settings are still the same on its symmetry. So I'm just seeing what happens as I tweak the sync on Oscillator B. So that's all very interesting. Now, we said at the start we're going to kind of try and come up with some kind of funky grooving thing. Well, check it out. So this LFO, we can change it from a sine wave to other things. And other things means lots of things. Okay, so maybe if I choose pattern 1 right there. So you can hear the LFO is now forcing both of these to try and follow this complicated pattern at the speed we dictate. So, you know, that's kind of interesting somehow, that the overall sound we've got going here. And we have this filter section that I turned off a few minutes ago. So I turn that on. That works just like any other filter section in the world. We've got it set to a low pass, so it's slowly taking away all the higher frequencies. Okay, we could choose from a huge, you know, repertoire of other preset filter shapes. I like notch. So you see as I slowly turn that, very subtly changes what the filter is doing. Okay, so I'm going to right click on this, and instead of adding it to the same LFO that we've already got, I'm going to choose a new one, a second one. Okay, and just get this second one to slowly drift through the region that we have selected via the depth. And, you know, I want to do it slowly. So way down here somewhere. And as you can recall, hopefully, the trigger is on. So it's starting from the central point and going into the positive each time. So let's turn that off. And see how that works. Crank up the depth. So it's just added a very sort of subtle, notchy sheen to the overall sound. Just turn the click on. Okay, so it's a bit kind of jingly, this sound overall. It's a bit kind of happy somehow. That's largely because of the 4 semitune interval that I've chosen here. C3 is kind of, you know, minor third. There's 8 semitones. That's different. Let's leave it on that. Okay, so there's a lot more going on here that I haven't talked about yet. We haven't discussed what parallel and series means, and these F1 and F2, they're actually 2 filters. We'll come back to that another time. But maybe we might add in a bit of good old portamento or glide into our sound. So as you see, as I crank that up, it's causing the note to bend as it hits the next note each time. So that's a classic move that's done in a lot of lead sounds now. And then let's go down here to this effects section. What have we got in here? Well, let's try this generic distortion. There are a few different kinds of distortion at our disposal. Let's turn up mech. So you can hear it, it makes it louder, but it also adds in grit. Okay, I've dialed some of that in to taste. Let's now grab ourselves a convolution reverb, and then within this convolution reverb we need to load an impulse response, an IR. Okay, so I'm going to find something from here. Good old snare. Wooden Room is good. Okay, you can hear what that's done immediately. So wet and dry, lots. But you know, let's not go crazy. Just turn that off. You can hear how dry it sounds without that convolution reverb now. Okay, so you can see there's all sorts of effects we can add into this. So what's this modulation effects? I've never looked at this file. There are some presets, so it's chorus. Okay, let's go big chorus. So the mix is useful, 100% mixed. It's going to be too much. I'm just going to have, you know, the tiniest bit here. Yeah, so you can see that pretty quickly we've just managed to make this, you know, crazy sound. Let's now flip around some of these patterns, which will just drastically change the groove of the whole thing. Here we go. Number 2. You can see as I speed up the sync value, it's just way too fast. It sounds, well, you decide for yourself how that sounds. Maybe odd beat 1. Yeah, kind of interesting. Serial angular grooves, random patterns. Random number 2. So, you know, I'm hoping you get the idea here. So, you know, what have we done? We've done loads, but yet we've barely scratched the surface of this thing. We've got 2 oscillators on. One of them is 8 semitones apart from the other, I guess. Both of them have either their sync or their symmetry values being automated by this LFO, LFO1. The global filter, only number 1, is being automated by this. You know, we could flip it over to that pattern 1. Yeah, and you can see that now the filter is affecting both of these according to that pattern. If we put it back on a low pass, we're going to get... Okay, and this bipolar button means from its center point, it's going in both directions. It's, you know, it's swinging both ways, let's say. If I turn that off, it's now unipolar. So it's only grooving in one direction, just from where it's set into the positive. Okay, so you can... I'm trying to find a groove, a particular... So kind of interesting. The sound overall is getting a little bit distorted, a bit ugly somehow. So, you know, you can see I'm adding in some more excitement. The resonance is pretty high. Let's bring that down. Maybe drive this a bit. So you can see the work, you could spend hours and hours doing stuff with just a couple of oscillators, one filter section, okay, and a couple of LFOs doing things, making things move, I guess is what we say. So you can have hours of fun just kind of stumbling across different groovy sounds. So let's change plastic voice. And you might happen across another. So again, barely scratch the surface, but hopefully, that's been kind of interesting somehow. Okay, great stuff. See you soon.